Hello, everyone, and you're very welcome back to the Man United Agenda, and it is the debut of the long-awaited fantasy football show. And hello, everyone, and you're very welcome to Rebels Fantasy Focus live on the Man United Agenda and FTB Sports. And I'm joined today by my co-panelists, Colm of FTB Sports and Pat Lawless. Colm, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm doing really, really well today. Thank you very much. I just can't wait to get stuck into this new fantasy league.
Pat, how are we doing, sir?
I'm not bad, lads. Not bad at all. I'm looking forward to you turning me from absolute garbage into a guru of the fantasy football. I can't wait, especially after last season.
Absolutely. And anyone from the Man United Agenda, those of us that are those of you that are regulars to this channel, please do give FTB Sports a like and a subscribe. They do some great work and they diversify across many sports. So if you have any interest in other sports, please do check them out because chances are they have it covered. Colm does host a show on a Monday night, and I'm sure he'd be delighted to see you join him to talk all things football. Colm, do you want to actually just tell the viewers briefly about your show on Mondays?
So basically, the show on Mondays, I get a few people on from different teams, and we talk everything Premier League. So a little insight into next week. We're going to be looking at the top transfer buys so far.
Very good, very good. I must check that one out because I imagine that could have connotations for what we're discussing today, and that is fantasy football. Now, of course, we are also running a fantasy football league, so make sure you do join the league on fantasy.premierleague.com. That is your code to join, and of course, there is going to be a trophy for the team that finishes top of the pile, the best of the agenda. And we will be arranging to get that shipped out to you, complete with engraving. And of course, there is some jeopardy for those of us on the panel, not on just this show, but across the Man United Agenda. The lowest scoring presenter is going to be looking at a forfeit situation. And that forfeit will be in the hands of you, the viewers, with some small terms and conditions. But we will get into that as the season progresses. But fantasy football, folks, there's your code. But let's get into the meat of the situation. And our first topic tonight is season preparation and tips. So, Colm, I'm going to start with you. What are the 5 or 6 golden rules that you would consider are necessary for preparing for the season?
Well, first, I wouldn't go out there and spend every single little bit of your money. You get 100 million to spend. Don't go out there and spend all 100 million because you could come up to an issue first game at season, and there could be an injury. So it's going to leave you a little bit shy. One of the tips I got given, I've heard a couple of people say it as well, and I've been doing it since, for many, many years. I've been playing fantasy football for many, many years. Always keep 0.5 million behind just in case you need it. So let's say you have a player that's worth 7 million and he gets injured and you need that extra 0.5. It's sat there in the bank waiting for you. That's probably one of the best tips I can give you.
Thanks very much, Colm. Now, Pat, you've been playing fantasy football for some time, and what are some of the pitfalls that you've learned as you've been playing throughout the seasons? Is there any experiences you could share with the viewers?
I always like to start at the back. I like to put a good goalie in, but I don't always just go for the cheapest chips, number 2. I always try to have a decent enough one that I know if there's a big game coming up for the goalie that I have, I can bench him and bring in another goalkeeper. I do like to stay clear of the centre backs. I like to keep wing backs in so I can get me goals and me assists. But the biggest one for me is you have to take your favourite players out of the equation and your own team out of the equation. You can't be putting in hard-working ballers like your Kantes because as good as you know they are footballers, they're not the kind of footballers you want for your fancy football. You want to be getting players in that get you assists. You want to be getting the players in that will get you goals. And sometimes do you get certain points? You get bonus points for certain players. So if you can get yourself a hard grafted midfielder that can play, get goals, get assists, get a bonus, that's what you want to be looking for as well. And if it's anything like last year, I wasn't a big fan of strikers last year. So it depends on what area you feel you might want to put your money into. Sometimes you can make your strikers, they wouldn't be the most expensive strikers in the world, but you can bring them in to do a job for certain games, but you wouldn't play them all the time. So that's just little attributes that I have.
Thanks very much, Pat. And I just see that the First Lady, the original First Lady of the channel, is looking for that code again. So we will, of course, oblige and get that up there for you. 1CZLY1 is your code, Jackie. And we do look forward to welcoming you into the league. I believe we are gone over the 50 mark at this point. So it should be very, very competitive. Now, the real thing here, though, is let's get before actually we get into meat and bones of team analysis, we have actually been luckily provided by one of the panelist teams to cut into and have an analysis and poke around in. We will be doing a viewer Q&A towards the end of the show. So if you have any questions, fantasy football related, that you would like answered by our panel, please do put in Q&A and your question, and we will try and handle as many of those as possible towards the end of the show. But let's just take a few quick comments actually before we go forward. I see TalkMU is in the chat. Hello, how are you doing? Calicio 2000 HD Gamers in the house. 80s Football Waffle is in the house. Our resident Arsenal supporter Anthony Herbert is in the building. Bart, the serious fan, is also in the building. We have Go Paul, OMONDI Juma, and Robbie Norman is also in the building, and they're all waiting to hear what our panel will think. And I'm going to ask the viewers, whose team do you think this may be that we are going analysing? So,
Solo. He's away. We can get away with it until he comes back at least.
Poor Solo. So, Colin, tell me the first thing that you notice about this lineup that sticks out at you that could be improved.
Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in that team that I wouldn't pick personally.
Okay.
Some at the back and 2 of the front 3.
2 of the front 3. So just to pick out one of those 5 that you would not pick and tell the viewers why.
So I'm going to go with Richarlison. Obviously, he's transferred over to Tottenham now. His price has rose since last year. He's not in many people's teams, so a lot of people aren't picking him. It's fair enough. But I look at it about the points, the goals, the assists, points per game, all this information. And we've got to think Richarlison's going to be trying to get in that striking position when you've got Harry Kane there. I mean, Harry Kane is always going to be the number 1 striker at Tottenham. Therefore, you're going to lose out on points from Richarlison just for that fact. And after the season he had last season, okay, he did well. 125 points last season, I believe. That's what he got. So for me, it's one that should definitely not be in a team. And not only that, he's got a bit of a temperament about him, hasn't he? He's absolutely amazing one day, and then the next game is a ghost.
Absolutely. Pat, pick out a flaw for me and tell me why.
In the midfield, we have Riyad Mahrez. Okay, I loved Riyad Mahrez when he was at Leicester, and I still like him at Man City. I don't like him when he plays well against us, but I have to admit he's a fantastic footballer. But the problem with having someone like Riyad Mahrez in your football team and in the Manchester City football team is they squad rotate so many times. You get lurched with a player who gets dumped onto the bench. Now, there is one way you can counteract this if you're unsure whether he's going to play or not. Make sure you don't put all your shillings into your top 11 and keep a few bob for your players on the bench. So if you do take the gamble and you do leave Riyad Mahrez in your team and he plays or he doesn't play, but if he doesn't play, you need to have a decent player on the bench ready to come off and do a job for you. So don't put all your money into your starting 11 is what I'm saying, especially when you have players like Riyad Mahrez in your team.
Thank you very much, Pat. And before I go to the comments, I'm going to take one of the flaws that I do see jumping right out at me. And it has also been seen by, I believe it was Paul, and that is the presence of two premium goalkeepers that are right at the top end of the fantasy value market. And that is Alison of Liverpool and Henderson of Manchester City. There's 11 million of the 100 million available. So roughly 10% of his capital into goalkeepers when he can only play one apart from one time in the season. So obviously that is something that he would need to address, or she would need to address, before they would submit their final lineup for the season. But let's get into some of these comments because we are starting to heat up here with it. Callode HD Gamer says, better put my name on that trophy.
That'll be one the column up now.
Anthony Herbert saying, I'm winning this. So again, more confidence. OMONDI Juma, historic first day for the Fantasy League. And he was on the phone to me, I can confirm today. And he has registered. So OMONDI Juma, the forfeit could potentially fall in his hands. So stay tuned for that. Bart is wondering, can he bring in Mr. James Milner? Do either of you want to take as why not to play James Milner? Pat.
So you want to take sentiment out of it. James Milner is a fantastic, hard-working footballer. He was at Leeds, he was at Newcastle, and now he was at Liverpool. But James Milner will not consistently get you bonus points. He won't get you goals, and he won't get you assists. So the most James Milner would get you on a weekly basis, if you're lucky, could be 2, maximum 3 points. He has got a yellow card in him because he's a hard-working player, but he's not the kind of player you want to have in your midfield. And if you're going to spend that kind of money on James Milner, there's better players out there for that kind of money if you take the sentiment out of it.
Thank you very much, Pat. Love Island with Vaughan saying, a whole show for fantasy football. Well, if they can have a Love Island show, we can have fantasy football. So that's how we're rolling here. On Monday is saying, Tanganga may be AC Milan bound, so that could potentially be a player that would be ineligible completely for the season. So obviously that would be something that would need to be changed for that person. We're not confirming that it's solo. Nobody's going to say that it is or isn't his team. And Monday's putting the boot in. He's saying this team is absolute doggy doo-doo. He's not a fan. And finally, Jackie is saying Mings. She's surprised by that. So, Cullum, do you want to take up the Mings issue?
Sure. Yes, I do agree. He was one of the other players that I did pick out, Mr. Mings. His value is low, which is good. You know, you don't want to be wasting all your money, as we can see in this team. He's got obviously 2 premium goalkeepers, Van Dijk, Diaz. You got he plays like Sterling, Jota, etc. So it's not a bad idea to put players in there that are cheaper. However, if Mings is going to be in that starting lineup of theirs, then it's going to cost you points. He's not been the strongest defender, and he's not going to be the strongest defender this season. So basically, I run off of a system, points per game per million. That's what I run off of. And Mings last season had a terrible, terrible return. And I believe he's actually gone up in price by 0.5. I'm sure it were only 4 million last year. 1 goal, 4 assists. You're not really getting anything from him. He's not going to be guaranteed clean sheets. But I understand, obviously, like I said, you have to get some of those cheaper players in there. To whoever this is, if they are watching, just make sure he's not in your team when Villa are playing some of the bigger lads, because you're going to get points going left, right, and centre.
Yes, thanks very much, Colm. Pat, do you want to take the next error in this particular lineup?
All right, so since Colin done the defenders, I'm going to go with the strikers. So I'm looking at Ivan Toney there. And Toney was, for the money he was last year, this was the kind of money I was talking about. So having a striker in your team that's not too expensive, but could do you a job. And I was only saying this exact words to Rebel before the show, that he wasn't a bad boy to have in your team last year. But a very good mark that Rebel pointed out was the reason why he done very well last year is because of a one Christian Eriksen who came into the team when they went from a relegation battle to a force to keep themselves up. But unfortunately, they haven't replaced Christian Eriksen this year. So how much is that going to affect Toney? We don't know. So it could be a bit of a gamble. So you have to do a little bit of background check on the team as well as just a player.
Thanks very much, Pat. Now, I'm going to pick up one point, and again, I'm going to throw it out to both of you. I'm looking at this team, and I'm seeing two Liverpool players. One is, or well, three in total, but two outfield players, Van Dijk and Diogo Jota. Now, Diogo Jota for me is a bit of a risky one this year because obviously there's Darwin Núñez, there's Diaz, and there's a certain Mr. Mo Salah, who some believe is a fantasy football staple, which we'll get to later on. But do you think this person is taking a major risk, again, with the point that Pat made, it's similar to City, in having possibly a rotationary / off the bench player there?
Yes, I believe they have took a very, very big risk on it. Jota's not going to play every game. Obviously, Liverpool are going to be swapping around, chopping and changing. And like I said, I go into a little bit of detail about it all, with the whole points per game per million and everything. And just to give a little insight onto it, so it's basically an algorithm. So Jota's 9 million. He's going to be, let's say, well, last season he played 35 games, 175 points for those 35 games. It works out once all the math and the algorithm and everything was 0.556 points per game. And that's only going to drop this season because, like I said, he's not going to be playing every game.
Thanks very much, Colm. And I am seeing another request for the fantasy football code, so this is a good time to plug it again. There you are, fantasy.premierleague.com, and your code is 1CZLY1. So make sure you do get your team entered there. I leave that up on the screen just another second. But I'm going to hit some comments as well, and I'll leave the code up for the duration of the comments. So Matthew Bassett is in the building, and he's saying fantasy football better than Love Island. So thank you very much for that endorsement, Matthew. Medi is in the building saying, I don't play fantasy. The reason is that I would never get players from teams like Liverpool and City. And just touching on that, how crucial is it to take sentiment and team loyalty out of the equation when you do engage in fantasy football?
A lot. When you're a Manchester United fan last year, that's for sure. So many times I wanted to put Bruno Fernandes back into my team after the year he had previously. I wanted to have Paul Pogba in my team after the first game of the season, and he got, was it 3 assists? Or he got 5 assists in 2 or 3 games.
That's right. Yeah, he had an absolute stormer in the opening 4 games of the season before he disappeared in injury.
Yeah, so I had to take sentiment out of it. Our defense was like a leaky plumbing. Nothing could fix it. So I think this year I'm going in with an open mind, and I won't be picking any players. Well, I might get a little bit excited, and I might stick 1 or 2 United players in. But it would be within reason, and it'd be for a good reason. It won't be because they're Manchester United players.
No, I mean, just to jump on what Pat said there, obviously I'm not going to give my whole team away, but I'll openly tell everybody right now, I have 1 United player in my team, and that is it.
There you are. So pearls of wisdom there, ladies and gentlemen. So if you are still picking your team, and of course you can change it anytime up until game week 1 commences without any penalty. And we are going to come to some changes to the game format later on the show as well. So make sure you do stay tuned for that, because there is a very significant item that is the World Cup happening this year, and fantasy football are obviously adapting for that. Anthony Herbert, in regards to the unnamed host team that's above there, is saying it's not a bad team, but nowhere near as good as mine. Well, if it's anything like that, Anthony, I'm looking forward to seeing it once the teams are revealed. OMONDI is crediting you with making a great point there, Pat, about the rotation of City. Pep roulette, as my friend base used to call it, is what we used to be dealing with. We're getting a preview here from Kalo HD Gamer. He's saying his team is Pope, Reece James, Pulisic, Walker, Trippier, Bruno, De Bruyne, preseason Pirlo, Sancho, Edouard, and Kane. Do you want to make any brief comment on that team, lads?
Preseason Pirlo had to be because he ran out of money because he has Kane, Sancho, De Bruyne, Bruno. Trippier is not a bad show. Newcastle finished off the season on a good high defensively, so hopefully they might come into the new season and keep her up. They didn't. It wasn't an all year round great performance, but they were pulling in some points towards the end of the year. So Perisic, Colin might explain this to me, but why is he classed as a defender and for a good price as well?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know why he's classed as a defender. Honestly, I have no idea why they've done that, but they make it up, don't they, as they go along? I think that's what it is. But no, I think the team he has there is a decent team. I like how he's not gone for your main staple goalkeepers like we see here, Alison and Edison, because he had a pretty decent season despite obviously what happened. But Pope, I like Pope, and he does. I've had him a couple of times, and he has got me quite a few points before. So that's an interesting one. I didn't think I'd see anybody with Pope in their team.
Yes, it definitely is an interesting call. Medi is berating this unnamed host team for not having a single Man United representative. But I suppose he took sentiment out the window and he decided that he would. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see Jay Ling's Messi Lingard appearing in that team at some point, maybe. But Jackie is saying, Matthew, can you imagine a fancy MU agenda Love Island? Oh, Lord. Lostella is telling us that, welcome, Lostella, that they're proud to say they have managed to squeeze 3 Manchester United players into the team. Matthew Bassett is asking, are we rating teams? We're not. We're just literally dissecting this one team that one of our wonderful hosts said they didn't mind that we bared it to the stars and had our opinions on it. UK Strain saying, good to see players back at Cairn today. Don't know what to make of Cristiano Ronaldo's situation. We might touch on that at the very end, mainly from the point of view of fantasy football connotations. But let's go back into this team. Colin, is there any more flaw? One more flaw that you want to take before we move on with this segment?
I'm going to look. Oh, it's kind of hard, isn't it? Really, I mean, Sterling for the price is a bit of a risk. You know, yes, he's Premier League proven and he has had a good record at City, but it's a completely new team, completely different way of playing. So I think Sterling could have an up and down season. I do like him as a player, and he does rack up points, but it all depends on how he fits into the Chelsea system, I suppose. So that's one possibly that we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens there.
Pat, is there any more comments that you might want to make before we move on with this?
Too many centre backs, not enough wing backs, not enough assists. You'd be relying on Diaz and Van Dijk to get you a couple of goals throughout the year. But could you imagine the difference it would make if you had a Cancelo or a Trent in there? Or even if you wanted to have a cheap person on the bench in Tyrell Malacia, you might never play him, but he wouldn't be a bad boy coming into the new season at the same time.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I do agree. I think there is a bit of disproportion in the team, as well as for me, just looking at it, there's two potential players that are likely to be out week one. Obviously, Richarlison is suspended. So, other than the reason that Cullimore has already provided for not using him, there's also that. And Diego Jota, again, given the fact that he's not fit at this point, it is highly unlikely that he would start week one. Now, the one thing that I do favour, and I'm going to throw this boat out to you as well, is I do like having players in each line of the field that I can do a one-shot transfer to get any other premium player for that game week. For argument's sake, last season, if you had Salah, you could go to Mane, you could go to whoever you wanted, knowing that if you had the requisite bank that you could get back to Salah in one shot again the week after, should you need. How crucial is it to set out your finances in a way that you can move your team to counter any possible threats from the player base jumping in on, say, a Haaland versus a Kane? How crucial is it to be able to move into those spaces?
Yeah, it's really crucial. Like I said, as one of the tips, make sure you've always got that little bit of money extra. But yeah, it's so important because obviously you're gonna want those premium players for when, for instance, let's say, I don't know, you've got Kane or Ronaldo or somebody like that in your team, and they pick up an injury, and the next game is away to a newly promoted team, and you're like, well, I could swap him out because he's injured, and I can bring, let's say you've got Ronaldo, you can bring in Kane. They're playing Nottingham Forest, for instance. There's a very, very good chance there that Kane is going to score goals. So being able to manage your finances so you can switch out and in premium players is vital.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to hit a few more comments. I am seeing somebody brand new to our channel, FPL Rubber Ducky. You're very welcome, and we're very happy to see some of the fantasy football community drifting into the chat. So please do share the show with your friends. Anthony Herbert says he's talking about rumors and Neymar going to City for 60 million. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but what would Neymar do to the fantasy market if he did come into it? Any opinion on that?
He's probably only have enough for 4 players.
I don't see him getting into many teams. I honestly
Yeah.
don't. Why? When you've got Salah, another Kulusevski, he's going to be a great shout again this season.
Yeah.
You've got all these other players that are going to be cheaper. Obviously, Salah is going to be around the same price as Neymar, but you've got loads of players that are going to be cheaper and probably perform better than Neymar because Neymar's going to have to settle into Premier League. And not only that, I think the Premier League's a bit too physical for him.
Yes, indeed. Some sage advice there. Just before I do continue with the last couple of comments, and we're coming up to the second last section before the viewer Q&A. So if you have any questions for the panel regarding fantasy football, please do get them in as we are rapidly approaching that segment of the show. Bill Baggio says, I only put Bruno in if he's guaranteed points. And Matthew Bassett, we're after jumping. Matthew Bassett says to us, come on, lads. Bruno, Sancho, Fred, Dallo, Rashford, Martial, Martinez, Marcelia. Surely they make someone's team. So maybe we will touch on United players later on. But let's move on to the next segment of the show. And that is Salah essential? And if so, who else would be in that category? I'm going to start with you, Colm.
See, everyone's opinion is different. I'm going to say no. He's not essential. Yes, he racks up loads and loads of points, but no, he's not essential. Spending that much money on one player is taking a massive amount of your budget when you could get 2 players that can easily rack up the same amount of points. That's my theory behind it anyway.
Pat, is there anyone that you consider essential? Obviously, we've heard from Colin the points per million and working it out mathematically. But is there anyone that jumps out for you?
I would love nothing more to have the likes of Mo Salah in my team with the likes of Cancelo and the likes of Trent racking up the points as they did last year. But to have all of them in your team, it really does hinder the rest of your team. So what I feel is, and I touched on this comment with the lads earlier on, you don't always have to start off with the best in your team. But what you can do is you can start off with a team that are of a good price, but are going to make you points and will bring up the value of your team over the course of a month or two to a position where you can actually afford to branch out and get a more expensive player. And at that stage, you will find little gems who you wouldn't have thought would have played as well, who are increasing in points, but their value started off low. So you might be able to sell a player that you bought for 6.5 million and then buy a player for 4.5 or 5 million. And that few bob goes towards getting Salah because the rest of your team is increasing in value. So as much as I'd like to have Mo Salah in my team, I wouldn't be too worried about getting him in straight away.
Thanks very much, Pat. Now, someone that has attracted a lot of attention is the free scoring Haaland from Manchester City. How quickly do you see him becoming the premium striker of note in this coming Fantasy Premier League season?
Look, I think he's going to be in a lot of teams this season. I really do. If you have a little bit of knowledge, you've done a little bit of background on Haaland as well, and this might shoot people in the foot a little bit, and it might not. People might change the teams. If you've watched Haaland play, every single debut, he has scored 3 goals. Every debut.
That's a very good point.
If he scores 3 goals in his first game in the Premier League, you will see a fluctuation of people putting Haaland as a team, whether they like him, whether they hate him, whether they don't know who he is. He will be in their team because he's going. If he starts off well this season, I reckon he will probably be one of the top point scorers this season.
Thank you very much.
After Fernando Torres and Ruud van Nistelrooy, so who was another striker that was similar to that makeup that played like them?
Played like Van Nistelrooy and...
Yeah, well, probably not Torres, but Van Nistelrooy, big, strong, pacey.
Big, strong, pacey striker.
Well, Lukaku tried to be it.
Yeah, he did. Lukaku did try.
There's many that tried.
There is many have tried. I can't really think, to be honest with you. I mean, when you look back at it, obviously there's been some great strikers in the Premier League, and the Fantasy League has benefited. People benefit from that in the Fantasy League. I suppose you could say, because he's not really big and powerful, is he? I was going to say Drogba, but he's not really big and powerful. But he were a natural goal scorer, wasn't he? And Haaland's natural.
Do you know what? I never thought of Drogba, but that was a great call.
There you go. Drogba is definitely fantastic. Right, as we approach the final segment of the show, I'm just going to shout out a few more people. Suze is in the building. She's saying, go on, the England women. Let us know the score, Suze, if you don't mind, in the chat. We obviously are live, so we are currently not availing of being able to watch it. Solo, from his campsite, is saying, really appreciate it. The air has a fantastic view, and the sunset is amazing. So do enjoy your holidays, Solo. We will look after the house while you're away. I want to say hello to Farquhar Line Trousers, one of the greatest usernames on YouTube, I have to say. Good evening to you, sir. And who else have we got here? Solo's team is all CBs, while I'm all fullback, says Canelo. So he's obviously assuming that the team that we were looking at was, in fact, the one of the venerable head of the table, Mr. Solo.
It wasn't.
I will not disclose whose team that was, but we will say thanks very much for allowing us to look at it. Now, before we rapidly approach the viewer Q&A segment, I just want to say thank you to all those viewers, and please do consider giving us a like, share, and subscribe. We will be here every Tuesday with your fantasy football content at 8:30. And for those of you that are not yet in, there is the code one more time during the show, 1CZLY1. So make sure you do get your team in. But we are coming to the viewer Q&A. So I don't see any questions yet from our viewers, so please do get those in there. But I'm going to ask you this. How crucial is it to have short, medium and long-term planning and keeping an eye on the fixture list of your team?
Yeah, it's really important. Obviously, the first couple of weeks, you just want a team that's going to get you some points on board, basically. You ain't going to really worry about too much the first couple of games, because obviously everybody's in the same boat. You know, it's a new season. Everyone's just done the preseason. Everyone's fresh. Long term, that's when you need to start looking at your teams. So again, for instance, if you've got, let's say, Dean Henderson, he's gone to Forest, hasn't he?
That's right.
Yeah, so let's say you've got Dean Henderson in your goal. He's a cheap goalkeeper. He's going to get some points. But they're coming up against a Liverpool, a City, you know, and you've got a backup goalkeeper that is coming up against somebody that's weaker than them too, you know, looking at them and then swapping them out so you're getting more points. Looking at the fixtures week by week is going to be very important throughout the whole season. Otherwise, you're just going to miss out on a bunch of points.
Absolutely. And now, Pat, I'm going to give you a slightly different question. We are seeing that there's a standoff at the Carrington Corral with regards to Mr. Ronaldo and his future. But in terms of fantasy football, how crucial is it that whether Ronaldo plays or doesn't play in terms of the viability of Manchester United assets? Are they better with or without Mr. Ronaldo?
Are Manchester United or your team?
Your team in terms of fantasy football.
Okay. So it all depends on who you have in the rest of your team. If you have put all your eggs in one basket to trump up the 12 million or 13 million that Cristiano Ronaldo's worth, there's a good chance that your second two strikers are probably worth 4 million and they come from the third choice striker from Leeds or not Forest. So you have to be clever in who you pick. So I wouldn't pick Ronaldo. He didn't have a preseason. He hasn't played with any of the new players yet. Not that he probably does, but I'd rather have somebody who is gelled with the squad, got off to a good start, and you feel is going to hit the ground running.
Thanks very much. So Monday is asking the question, what happens if unregistered players start getting games? Example, Zidane at Man United. Colm, I presume that what would happen there is that the admins of the server would add those players as they start getting games in order to allow teams to select them.
Yep, that's exactly what will happen. As soon as an unregistered player starts playing, you'll see him get updated onto the FPL.
Perfect. Lostella is asking us, sometimes you get double game weeks and sometimes some of your players might not be playing. How crucial is it to navigate that, Pat?
It all depends. When you have some on a double game week, by the time the double game weeks come in, you should already have your players who you know are going to play every week. And this is where you'll get caught out with the likes of your Man Cities. And hopefully, it's probably not a great thing to say, but you might see it with the likes of Manchester United this year with squad rotation. There's going to be a lot of it. So you have to be clever in who you're going to pick. And sometimes I look into teams who have injuries, and sometimes I put players in my team who I know the second striker may be injured, and I know he's definitely going to get played both games. So it's just little tips like that are too good to watch out for.
Absolutely. Anthony Herbert is telling us about his pedigree. In fantasy football, he finished third out of a 20-person league last time out. So he has to say that he's won is the best fantasy league out there. Okay, so Anthony Herbert is definitely confident. And FC United forever, thank you very much for joining us. You're on to support the fantasy league. Well, that's a FIB. Still time for FM. Would you like to tell us what FM is?
Football Manager.
Football Manager, yes, indeed. Even though I don't know, did Football Manager lose its luster? Oh no, Championship Manager was the one that lost its luster. Football Manager is still going strong. Rebel will try and get some Kerry players in. Yeah, you never know though. I think Coach Cooper could do a job up front.
You might lose your shirt with yellow with yellow cards.
Yeah. Will you guys be announcing Prem News, etc.? So any injuries that do come abreast, we will obviously hit that in segments. So to let you know, as we know, any injuries, suspensions, etc., as they do arise. Just one thing that I would say as a tip: be very wary of the flagging within Fantasy Premier League because sometimes it is not accurate. A friend of mine last season dropped a player that was red flagged. Said player turned up and scored a brace and got an assist. So it is not always 100%. So sometimes you do have to take that chance and hope that you have somebody relevant on the bench that if they don't play, that they're available to come on. But finally, in regards to the fantasy football, obviously this season we have a World Cup. And fantasy football have said that they're going to allow a complete free reign on transfers after the World Cup until the game week renews. So obviously that's going to change the strategy in terms of your wild cards. You are going to be required to have your first wild card used before is it game week 14 or 15? I can't remember exactly. I'll have to check that for you. So is there going to be a change to the strategy in the way that those wildcards are deployed, Colum?
I believe so. Obviously, this World Cup's going to throw everything into turmoil, really. People are going to go away and play for the countries, come back. They might not be fit. They could be injured. They might come back on better goal scoring form. They might have had a terrible, terrible World Cup. They could have got to a final and then got beat by Italy on penalties. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen at all. So it's going to be important and it's going to change the wildcard system completely.
Pat, in terms of the chips, how important is it to utilize them in the best way possible? We have triple captain, we have the bench boost, and we have the free hit. Now, just explain the free hit to anyone that doesn't know what it is. It is a 1 game week change to your team that reverts once the game week is concluded. So you're allowed utilize unlimited changes when the free hit is active to alter your team for that game week before it reverts to your prior team for the following game week. That is one that people seem to still make errors on. I have seen people making the 2 or 3 changes, believing them that they're permanent, and then being caught the following week when those players aren't present. Is there any tips for that you could give people for deploying their chips, Pat?
Well, considering we were just talking about the double game week, the free hit can be your best friend or your worst enemy for the double game week. Sometimes you might see players. Sometimes the double game week doesn't always have every single team playing. It could be only 7 teams playing, 7 matches playing, or whatever it is. And you don't have you could be losing 3 or 4 of your players out of the team, including your substitutes. And that free hit comes in very valuable. But just touching on what Colin said there a few minutes ago about Haaland, it's all a roll of the dice when it comes to the triple captain. And what Colin said is Haaland scores a hat-trick on his first game. Why not go all out and put a triple captain in the first game if he's going to continue to have his record of scoring a hat-trick in his first game with a triple captain? It might happen, it might not happen. Who's going to try it? Who's not going to try it? Who's going to laugh about it after the first game week? We don't know. That's all the joy of fantasy football.
Thank you very much, Pat. So before we wrap up the show, I'm going to bring you up on the big screen and you can let people know where to find you. So, Colum, over to you.
So, yeah, you can find me right here on this show, on the Man United Agenda. You can also find me on Twitter at ColmFTB, and you can also find me over on the FTB Sports YouTube page every Monday at 7:30, where we talk all things Premier League.
Thank you very much, Colum. And Pat, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but over to you.
You catch me on the agenda, and you'll catch me on Twitter at Pat Lawless at the Man United Agenda.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Please do consider giving us a like, share, and subscribe. We do really appreciate it. And if any of your friends have any interest in fantasy football, please do, by all means, share the code with them and invite them to come watch us on the Fantasy Football Show every Tuesday at 8:30. And we would be more than happy to answer all your questions in that regard. Next Tuesday, we will be previewing Game Week 1's fixtures, maybe having a look at some differentials. But Colum will be dishing up a wonderful show in my absence. So we look forward to seeing you all again next Tuesday. If you do have any other questions regarding season prep, please do leave them in the comments after the show, and we will try and get back to you as soon as possible on that. But for now, I have been Rebel, and we thank you, and we're signing out.